it is the director of the Carnegie Foundation, and in that capacity, actually the boss of the facility that we are blessed to be a guest of today, the Peace Palace. Thank you very much for joining us and making time in your undoubtedly very busy schedule, Mr. Steven van Hoogstraat. Give him a warm welcome. So, Mr. van Hoogstraat, like I said, I'm sure your calendar must be very busy as the director of the Carnegie Foundation. So, why did you make time for us?
Well, there are two pretty good reasons. One is that it is fun to welcome you in the Peace Palace, this youthful audience we don't have every day. And we believe strongly in the idea that The Hague is a city of international justice, and that name derives from a number of institutions which are established in The Hague, like the International Court of Justice or the Criminal Court in Voorburg, or Iran-US even. And, but those institutions do not make a city, do not make a capital. It's the, I would say, the life in the city. It is the exchange, it's the debate. And that is what is happening here today. So I would like to be part of that.
What does the rest of your day look like, if I may ask?
Well, we have a spot of bother with some asbestos findings in the building of the judges, so that keeps me busy, I must say, quite a lot. We, from the Peace Palace, run the Hague Academy of International Law. You can see that here. This is the room where every summer we have 600 students from all over the world, and that brings some work with it. And well, there's all sorts of little toing and froing in a day on Friday, I can tell you.
Wow. Well, in all of that toing and froing, for you to make time for us, and we're very grateful for that. Thank you very much, Mr. van Hoogstraat. And who knows, maybe you will see some of these faces back.
Maybe. Well, it's a nice career to be working here, I can tell you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, we've been talking about children's rights pretty much all afternoon, but what is that really about? Well, our next guest is probably the best person to ask that question. She's Professor of International Law and Development and co-creator of the Kids' Rights Index. Please give her a warm welcome, Karin Arts.
What do Somalia, South Sudan, and the United States of America have in common? At this very moment, they are the three only countries in the world that have not yet committed to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. On a more positive note, 194 states have rallied around the Convention, with Palestine as the latest party to join last April. This year, in November, the Convention on the Rights of the Child will exist for 25 years. And in the run-up to that event, we already see many reports coming out, asking questions about what have we gained and what is there still to do after 25 years of the CRC, as the Convention is also often referred to. When I think of it, first of all, I want to say that I think it's really amazing that 194 states have found reason to commit to the Convention and to embrace it, including the 4 general principles that the Convention presents as key directions for any work to be done or decisions to be made about children. Now, what are these 4 general principles? 1, it's the survival and development of children that should be the main goals to pursue. 2, children should not be discriminated. 3, when we make decisions about children, the best interest of the children should be placed first. And fourthly, in all processes affecting children, wherever possible, children and youth should have space to participate. Now, if lawmakers, policymakers, and service providers and other people working for and with children would follow these 4 general principles through, the world would be a better place for children. Has the Convention made a difference in practice? Well, there are many different answers to that question. But for me, the first important very element is to say that the Convention has challenged many people working with and for children to think about and to think critically about what a child rights-based approach to their work could mean and how to practice it. And what are the obstacles in formulating child rights-based approaches and in practicing them. In a much more formal way, I think one of the most important products that have come about in 25 years of the Convention on the Rights of the Child is processes of law reform that we have seen happening in many countries after they joined the Convention. And where children's rights, through the adoption of new laws and the revision of old laws, children's rights became recognized in national legal systems like never before. And a clear example of an area where this has come about very significantly is the area of juvenile justice, which is about, say, roughly children who committed crimes or who have been accused of having committed crimes. It's about issues relating to arrest, detention, and trial of children. And roughly before the Convention, well, many countries didn't have special legislation to deal with the situation of these children. And then such children would be treated exactly in the same way as adults were. And you can imagine that that will lead to, potentially leads to serious problems in practice. After the Convention, many states have now special juvenile justice arrangements. Now, I'm not naive about the Convention, and I know that there is still a lot of work to do. And at present, there is not a single country that could claim that it actually lives up to the Convention's requirements in their entirety. And we all know that many children are still suffering from child rights violations, from lack of participation, and from lack of opportunities to develop their full potential. But I also know, and I've seen many examples in the field of well-designed and well-implemented child rights-based approaches to such problems, making an important difference in practice. And one example that I can give here this afternoon is an example relating to NGO work on the right to birth registration in the Philippines. Now you might think, birth registration, that is a very bureaucratic issue to highlight. It's about a registration office in a municipality doing paperwork. But it's important to realize that birth registration in practice often is the beginning of the realization of children's rights. Because without birth registration, a child doesn't formally exist in the eyes of the state. And also, the age of a child is not formally recorded. And this can lead to all kinds of problems for children to access education, to access healthcare, to access social security. Now, the NGO in the Philippines that I worked with, on the basis of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, came to the conclusion that, one, birth registration is a right and not just a service to be provided to children. And secondly, the NGO concluded that, according to the Convention, to which the Philippines is one of the state's parties, is obliged to make this happen. So it's the government that has an obligation to make this happen. With that message, the NGO approached the government of the Philippines, more in particular the Civil Registration Office, and it involved the municipalities, but also local communities. And they made an extra effort in order to realize an inclusive system of birth registration. Because, well, as you might imagine, it is easier to make sure that children who live in an easily accessible urban area are registered than it is to do the same for children who live in remote places. So then, for example, through using mobile registration offices, which are open during weekend days, so that people could come down from the hills where they live to actually register their children, was important. But also, where that was necessary, registration fees were dropped. After all, you shouldn't have to pay for a right that you have. As a result of these efforts made, the registration levels went up dramatically. And at a certain moment, the NGO actually could draw the conclusion, okay, our job is done here, we pull out of the project, but they only did so after they made sure that the government would continue. And that is still the case as of today. And this example thereby also illustrates that for realizing children's rights, it's really important to involve all of society. Realizing children's rights, yes, requires governments to do certain things, but it also requires involvement of all kinds of other members and parties in the society, of the people most immediately around the children, caretakers, parents, children themselves, obviously, local municipalities, central government, and a lot of other actors that are in between. Now, having the convention is all very well. But what else do we need to make progress? And there, one of the things that I am working on at the moment, and that I think is extremely important, is that we need more hard data about children. On the one hand, we know a lot, or we think we know a lot about the problems of children. But when we zoom into particular situations and really get into the details of particular situations or of particular groups of children, then quite soon, very often, we find out that we actually don't know all the details that we need to know in order to understand the problem. And this applies both to the south, to developing countries, but also to the north. Mind you, the government of the Netherlands has several times been reprimanded by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child for not being able to produce the required figures, the required statistical data about children in the Netherlands that the CRC committee is asking for in its reporting procedure. And from a child rights perspective, and especially the aspect of inclusiveness that I was referring to before, it's really important to have specific information on particular groups such as indigenous children, on children with disabilities, or to know what are the consequences of certain problems for boys as compared to girls. And there we still have a lot of work to do in terms of data gathering. Now again you might think, oh yeah, another bureaucratic detail, statistical data. But in practice, this data gap really is a serious challenge for those who try to make policies or do projects for and with children. Because if you don't know exactly what the problem is, how can you fix it? I'm one of the founders of the Kids' Rights Index, and that is an attempt to draw attention to the issue of the data that we lack on children. And it's very clear that on certain issues, in most countries, actually, we have no reliable data at all. Child abuse is a clear example, where in many countries it's really hard to know what the real situation is in terms of child abuse. And obviously this has to change, and the Kids' Rights Index is meant to expose the need for change and to, in that way, make a contribution. On other issues, there is data, but no hard conclusions are drawn on how states are doing in tackling these issues. The Kids' Rights Index combines existing information from UNICEF, which each year publishes the state of the world's children, and from the Committee on the Rights of the Child, and then it ranks states on their child rights performance. And it's really interesting to see what happens when you do that, when you rank states. That triggers people's attention and has proven to be a really interesting way of starting debates about the facts underlying and the performance record underlying the rank of a state in the index. It's all the information that we used for that exercise and also all the results are publicly available in a website, kidsrightsindex.org. It's still very much work in progress, but at present already, the Kids' Rights Index material allows for quick scans on how states are doing in terms of working with the general principles of the Convention, which I outlined for you at the beginning of my talk. And also in terms of making available budgets. Budgets, of course, benefiting children. The outcomes of this exercise, in my opinion, are very interesting and at times also unexpected. For example, the Kids' Rights Index results clearly make the point that, of course, the development level of a country is an important basis for what that country can do in terms of realizing children's rights. But it also shows very clearly that political will to make the maximum effort for children is equally important, if not more important. And that, for example, comes out in the fact that a developing country such as Thailand ranks unexpectedly high in the Kids' Rights Index, whereas a developed country, member of the European Union, Italy, ranks unexpectedly low in the Kids' Rights Index. Now, this brings me to the end of my talk. The bottom line of my contribution is that, in my view, all work on children's issues should be child rights based. And on that note, I challenge all professionals working with and for children, but also all of us, to think hard about what we can do to develop a child rights based approach to our work, to apply it in our work if that is possible, and also in our personal lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karin, for that inspiration. Now it's time again to hear from you and from those joining us through the live stream. Please send us your questions through the usual channels. So that's the Facebook page, and that is the website, haguetalks.com. And of course, through Twitter, using the hashtag HagueTalks. Is there anybody who has a question for Karin just now about the children's rights agenda? Well, I do. Actually, a couple. You were mentioning a word that I find quite triggering in this light, which is the word responsibility. You said there's shared responsibility, so there's the people in the children's vicinity, the teachers, caregivers, but there's also governmental responsibility. What about corporate responsibility? Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? I mean, I see some sneakers. I'm not sure about my shoes. I'm thinking about, you know?
Ja. In deze microfoon? Ja, die microfoon. It's, I think one of my core messages was that indeed for realizing children's rights, it's important to mobilize all actors in society, and to also try and involve seriously all actors in society. And I think there are several answers possible to your question. If I approach the question in a legal way, then I immediately run into a problem. Because the bulk of human rights law and also the bulk of the Convention on the Rights of the Child actually speaks to governments. And this is something that holds for the large part of human rights law. However, in recent times, we have found out that that is a big shortcoming. And that it's, sure, governments violate human rights, and governments have a role to play in realizing human rights, but others as well. And that is a major challenge for human rights law, but in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we actually see the first signs of change coming through, because the Convention on the Rights of the Child refers also to the role of us as individuals, or us as parents, or caretakers about children. But there is no reference yet to corporate entities in the Convention, but there are other attempts to develop codes of conduct which speak to the role of business.
Yeah. I remember the UNICEF and there's some other NGOs connected to it, children's rights principles that actually have been adopted by a couple of businesses. So we have some questions here. So could you please introduce yourself and ask your question?
I'm Georgia and I'm from Webster University.
Could you, well, 1 second, I think we have a, yes, please, can you repeat it?
Okay, I'm Georgia and I'm from Webster University, Leiden. I have a question because you've used the word inclusive a lot of the times, and I'm wondering, what can we do to include the children more in forums that weren't initially created to have them in it, and it's also so that we can avoid to have people only claiming to talk on their behalves, but actually ensuring that their voices are heard.
Yeah.
Very good question. Thank you very much.
And this is actually one of the, well, in my opinion, one of the biggest contradictions that we see in 25 years Convention on the Rights of the Child. Because if you look at the content of the Convention, one of the biggest innovations that it brought about was this emphasis on the importance of child and youth participation. But then if you look into actual practice, you find that most people find it actually really difficult to do this, including the Committee on the Rights of the Child, only in a very limited way has child or youth involvement in its procedures. I think at a local level, closer to home in a way, it is perhaps easier to do that, and there are very many interesting attempts to do that. But difficult it remains.
Yeah, or if it does happen, it is almost like some kind of PR stunt, like, oh, we also involve children, but then it's only window dressing.
Yeah, but it's also a lost opportunity, because in many instances, although adults think they know what is the problem and what is the way to solve the problem, very often when they give genuine space for child and youth participation, they are actually set to a different path, and they come to solutions which otherwise would never have come about.
Yeah. We have another question, please.
Hello, my name is Dika from ISS. I'd like to ask, conventions like these that you're talking about, talk about the universality of certain rights. So what is the convention stance and experience when dealing with cultural and religious barriers towards children's rights in practice on the ground in different countries? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The convention came about in 1989, which was in the history of the world a very important moment, always marked as the end of the Cold War. Okay, looking back at it now, I don't know, maybe we're back into a new Cold War, but at that moment in time, this issue of the universality of human rights was in the forefront, because the hope was that with the end of the Cold War, there would be space, all space and resources could be mobilized for realizing human rights. And in part, that has led the drafters to the convention to pay a lot of attention and to draft the rules such that they would make sense, that they would be feasible across a broad range of different contexts. Because, of course, it's very clear that the agenda for children's rights in the Netherlands is very different from the agenda for children's rights in Sierra Leone or in Indonesia. And therefore the convention, the convention acknowledges that. Also legal systems differ a lot. And even a concept which may exist in one country, such as adoption, does not exist in the legal system of another country. And if you closely read the convention, you actually see that the drafters made an effort to do it in such a way that the text is relevant and can be applied. in different countries. Best interest of the child has been referred to quite a bit. That is a clear example where, well, a lot of people perhaps at first phase would say, yeah, the convention refers to best interest of the child and say we should place that first. But the convention doesn't tell me what that is or how I should determine what is the best interest of the child. But that was done on purpose because the idea is that close to the child, close to where a decision is to be made, that is where people are best placed to actually see what are all the circumstances and what would be the appropriate decision or the appropriate way to go about the situation. And this is something you cannot do top-down through a UN human rights treaty.
Karin, I'm afraid we have to round off because our next speaker is already waiting for us. But I would like to thank you very much. One last question. Will you be around briefly after the program?
Yes, I will.
So if there's anybody who has any further or maybe more detailed questions for Karin, she will be around, easily spotted in the as the lady in red.
Yes,
thank you very much, Karin. Another round of applause. Yeah. The best interest of the child, as Karin mentioned, a crucial part of that convention. Well, that best interest was not what our next speaker was dealing with. Like many adoptees, Patrick wished to retrace his roots and find out about his past. His story became known as the Brazil baby affair. Let's listen to how his illegal inter-country adoption violated his human rights and kept him from finding his true identity. Let's welcome Patrick. There you go. Floor is yours.
I will tell you how I was deprived of the human right to identity. And I will inform you about the consequences of this human rights violation. I grew up not knowing I was deprived of the human right to identity. But in the process of my illegal adoption from Brazil, shortly after my birth, my identity was intentionally taken from me. But I'm not the only one. This happened to many babies from Brazil. In 1981, the Dutch police started an international criminal investigation on illegal inter-country adoptions from Brazil. The investigations, officially known as the Brazil baby affair, disclosed illegal adoptions of Brazilian babies to several European countries and the US. In short, the Brazil baby affair has intentionally deprived these babies of their right to identity. In the same way, from the same country, in the same period of time. The outcome of the investigation in the Netherlands represents only a small part of the scandal. It is just a sample. It clearly demonstrates, at a minimum, that dozens of Brazilian babies were illegally adopted. In most of the Dutch cases, the adoptive parents confessed to being guilty of acts which constitute the deprivation of the human right to identity. This happened because the adoptive parents registered the Brazilian babies as their biological child. Some of them got on an airplane to Brazil with a fake belly, pretending they were pregnant. Most of them stayed in Brazil for a very short period of time, feigning the final stage of a pregnancy, giving birth on a holiday in Brazil. By registering a Brazilian baby as their own, they erased any reference to the baby's original identity. Just knowing I had been adopted had the effect of cutting me off from a part of myself, from my origins. At first, I did not worry about the impact it would have on me because I always believed I could search for my roots in Brazil whenever I was ready. It was not until I was ready to find my roots as a young adult that I started to discover I had been illegally adopted, something I was unaware of throughout most of my life. When I turned 21, I was ready to find my roots. I commenced a life-changing journey in search of my identity. When I showed my adoptive parents the ticket I brought to Brazil, however, they told me I could not search for my identity because there was no such information available. I nonetheless returned to Brazil without any information about my identity. I was shocked to find out that my birth date is made up. My adoptive parents always kept this identity-defining knowledge from me until the moment I boarded the aircraft, after they had told me that information about my original identity did not exist and that I would never accomplish anything with my search because even my official birth date is false. I started searching based on a false identity because my adoptive parents had registered me officially as their biological child, both in Brazil as well as in the Netherlands, not as their adopted child. As a consequence, I did not know when or where I was born, let alone who was my mother. The only lead I had was the fact that I should have been born in São Paulo. As a result, I started the search for my identity in a city with more inhabitants than in the entire Netherlands, without any kind of information. I'm not a believer, but I was always strongly convinced of one particular circumstance that permanently kept me going. I was driven by the fact that I had not dropped out of the sky. I was searching for a needle in a haystack, but I did not even know in which haystack I should be looking for. My search was all about possible birth locations and uncertain data such as possible date of my birth and my possible weight at birth. I kept returning to Brazil and I kept searching. In 2010, I started to realize that those responsible for my illegal adoption provided me persistently with false data about what supposedly has happened. It took me more than 10 years to piece together the truth and develop an account of what has actually happened. More than 10 years. When I finally reached the end of my search, after having traced dozens of possible mothers by confronting hundreds of women with the same names, I met with the daughter of the last remaining possible mother I was searching for. She was very hard to find, but when I found her, she told me that her mother passed away in 1985. She knew that she should have a younger brother, but no one knows what exactly has happened to him. A DNA test conclusively confirmed having the same mother. I found her, but years too late. As a consequence, I still have yet to find my father. No one can tell me who he may be, as only my mother could have told me, for certain. I'm still searching for my father and his family. After tracing my deceased mother, I went through 2 years of mourning and reflection, during which I eventually started to comprehend the nature and implications of my illegal adoption. Last year, I was able to start a thorough reconstruction of my illegal adoption. Since 2011, I have been able to reconstruct my true identity and what happened after my birth through personal investigations and inquiries, as well as extensive international research. I uncovered not only what happened in my case, but also what has essentially happened more generally in other cases which are part of the Brazil baby affair. Based on 15 years of experience, I decided that numerous of victims could use my support. For this purpose, I founded the NGO Brazil Baby Affair, which was the name of the official police investigations on the illegal adoptions from Brazil. Through the NGO, I will continue researching and start informing the world about the Brazil Baby Affair. Consequently, I am putting into use all the efforts I made in the ongoing search for my identity. Ultimately, I am putting my family tracing experience into practice to help others as a constructive way to move forward.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for sharing your story with us. We will see you back here in a few moments. Thank you for your courage and audacity to stand here. Our next speaker, Carmen, also came a long way, and quite literally that is. She started as a refugee and an undocumented migrant into the United States. And now, guess what? She's assistant professor in human rights at Elon University in North Carolina. Please welcome Carmen. Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you. I decided to sit because I want to engage with you in this conversation. So I'd like to ask you if you could close your eyes for a moment and think about a situation that I'm going to tell you. Imagine that a bomb explodes in the area of reception in which you were just recently. What would you do? You may open your eyes, and maybe during the time of the dialogue, you can share with us what your thoughts were. But let me tell you what I did. I run. I literally run. After a bomb went off in the building of the Association of Students, where I was very active in the community. I grew up in a country at war, and so I consider myself a child of war. For many years, I observed decapitated bodies at the age of 9 when I was coming back from the beach. I saw those kinds of situations also when I was coming back from the school. The father of my baby daughter at the time suffered the same fate. For all the Salvadorian families that are either in El Salvador or around the world, we have at least one member of our family who has been killed or disappeared. In fact, over 75,000 Salvadorians were killed during the Civil War that lasted for 26 years during the 70s and the 80s. So for me to come and tell you this story hasn't been easy, because I haven't remembered for many years. And one previous speaker talked about how trauma is there and stays there for many years. But for me, it's been the opportunity to actually connect my experience with that of the unaccompanied minor who are crossing the border. Before I do that, let me just explain the picture of being at home and living that violence. But on the route, it wasn't easy for me. I traveled with my baby to the US and sought refuge there because I had family there. But on the way, I was literally not forced, but I was required, which is pretty much the same, to give my baby daughter, who I was breastfeeding at the time, to the female coyotes. Coyotes are smugglers that traffic people across the borders. And she was able to make it through the US, but I wasn't. She was passed in a car with the documentation of a Mexican child. I was detained in the border, but just before that, I had been sexually assaulted by a male coyote. I didn't know how to swim at the time. I do now better. But I had to cross the river, and that was a difficult thing to do. But it was a necessary thing to do, because there was no choice. So luckily, I say now, I was detained by the immigration and deported to El Salvador, but desperate out of the need to rejoin with my daughter. After 3 months, I was able to do so. This time, traveling by car on the floor of the car. So this is not a rare story that you will hear. This is the stories, and even worse, of the unaccompanied minor who are crossing the US-Mexican border. The United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees actually did investigate if these children are in need of protection and why they're fleeing. So they interviewed about 404 children who have been detained in the border, and they interviewed Maritza, who is only 15 years old at the time of the interview in 2013. And her uncle asked her to leave El Salvador because she was a gang had a crush on her. And that actually meant that he could come at any time and pick her up. And she knew better that girls were being raped and dismembered, put in a plastic bag, and thrown in the street. So for her and for her uncle was a matter of life and death. And she said, just leave. Kevin, who was 17 years old at the time of the interview, had a similar story. His grandmother asked him to leave because he was also been asked to join the gangs. So his grandmother said, if you join the gangs, we'll shoot you. If you don't join, then another rival gang is going to shoot you, or the police is going to shoot you. In any case, you're going to be killed. So it's better that you just leave so they don't shoot you. So these stories are actually an important one to keep in mind as we try to understand what is happening with those children. But this study I mentioned actually concluded that these children need protection because what they're fleeing is violence. They're fleeing and trying to escape from, also in some cases, child abuse, and in other cases, human trafficking. However, this kind of protection has not been granted to them. In the United States, it's actually not granted, even if the US has the power to do so. There's an executive order that grants powers to the president to be able to declare refugee status to this group. But he has to do it by October 1st. It doesn't seem like he will, because recently he declared that he was going to wait until the elections to take action on immigration issues. In fact, humanitarian aid is still stuck in Congress, and needed services are not funded at this point, and it's been taken away from other refugees to attend this situation. Judge Marks, who is the president of the National Association of immigrant judges recently declared in a press conference that they are dealing with cases of life and death. And she characterizes as penalty cases, death penalty cases. Because what it is at stake is actually whether at removal or in deportation, these children will be able to be safe. We heard reports that youth, minors in Honduras, upon return in San Pedro Sula, have actually been found in the morgue, death, and more likely by gang violence. So the question to you is today, would you remember these stories that you heard here? Would you remember them tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after? Because they're gonna keep on coming, and more stories are building up. Facts and figures are very, very important. And we heard the speaker earlier, how important data is. But I came to tell you that it's not enough. We get the big picture about what is happening with data, but we may lose the depth of that picture. So pay attention to the stories that you're hearing today, and seek for other stories. Connected with data can give you a better sense of the situation that, in this particular case, the unaccompanied minor are actually going through. But I came here also to tell you that although it seems like the things have not improved a lot since the Convention of Human Rights, in the Convention on the Rights of Children, and all of the other conventions that constitute that human rights framework, there is still hope. And to me, the hope is in the responsibility we have as citizens to make such conventions a reality. Because it seems sometimes that it is only governments that go and negotiate and make these conventions, and they're the ones responsible. Yes, they have a responsibility. But we as citizens, whether we are here in The Hague or in the US, we have the responsibility to make these conventions a reality. That responsibility to protect children is not only in the hands of desperate mothers, such as I was. It's not in the hands of desperate communities who have to blockade the entrance of their communities in order to keep away those who are stealing children, like was in the case of Guatemala, which I researched. But the responsibility is also in each one of us here today, because we have the power to hold our government accountable for what they do here at home, for what they do abroad. And providing support and all of that to governments that are violating human rights and not doing what they have to do, it's can be also part of that complicity. So how do we engage as global citizens, as engaged citizens? And this is an important question, and one that I think we'll probably not answer here, and but back home, I hope you continue to wonder about it. Of course, social action, social activism, advocacy work is very important. But it's also important to take into consideration things like the Convention on the Rights of Children, that acknowledges the right to food, to shelter, to personal safety, to cultural heritage. And put those conventions at the center of our lives. That's what I do every day. And that's what I hear. I'm here to talk to you. So, the last question is, how committed are you to do such a thing? To hold the values, to hold the principles of these conventions at the center of your lives. So I want to close down by asking you to close your eyes again. And just think about the possibility of a world where children who are vulnerable and who are most vulnerable, who deserve protection, are able to obtain it. Thank you for having me.
Carmen Monico. Gracias, Carmen. Wow, that was a very inspiring story. Thank you for being here. And can I also ask Patrick to join us again on stage? And of course, this is the moment, you know already, this is the moment where you can actually join the discussion, and you can, if you have something to share or something to ask, you can ask your questions here at the microphone, or use the hashtag Hague Talks on Twitter, or leave your questions on the site. Our social media team is waiting for you. Yes, we have 2 questions on the left. If you could please introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm from Bangladesh. I live in a country which is not in conflict, but we do have about millions of children who live on the street every day. They do not have parents, they do not have caretakers. They, I think by the age of 4 or 5, they're very much exposed to drugs and sexual exploitation on the streets, and they do not have that protection or that shelter. But as far as I know, my country does, have signed on to the Convention of Children's Rights, and governments and certain NGOs and the United Nations, they're all there working on it every day. But your experiences are very inspiring, that you've survived and lived through, and you're here to share your story. How do you think these children who do not probably know that there's an alternate lifestyle, who are not aware of their rights themselves, how do you think we as individuals in our daily lives can help to make that happen? If, for example, we're not involved in any NGOs, or we're not involved with the government, how do you think as individuals, or as a student, I would really like to know, how do I can make a difference, really?
How can we as individuals make the difference? I would like to ask both of you to answer that question. Who would like to start? Ladies first? Ladies first. Carmen, you have your...
Oh, I always forget. Okay. There is something called student activism, right? That's what I'm here. Except that I was in an environment in which that was not allowed. But here, you can engage in a student organization. They're very good models around the world about how students can actually make a difference in the life of children, not just by raising funds, but by advocating and doing outreach, community outreach, outreach in campus and community outreach, and engage in other type of activities. Now, I hopefully, some organizations are actually working in engaging also students in Bangladesh and in other places. I think the example we have from Bosnia is a wonderful one. That in Palestine, where people in the community are actually involved in this kind of civic action that is really necessary. We can't wait for governments to have all the answers and assume all the responsibilities. So we need to hold them responsible for the part that they are, but we need to do our part. And I hope you do.
Thank you. Patrick, individual responsibility. What do you think? What can individuals like us do?
Well, in the cases of the Brazilians who are illegally adopted, many of them, they actually experience some sort of awareness about their identity on a daily basis, which might be different than from someone who's not adopted or not illegally adopted. This can be by asking where you're from when you look different, or when you were born, or where. And those questions actually, they come back on a daily basis in filling out forms about your date of birth, and many of them are in a position that they're used to talk about their identity, and I hope that the NGO and this presentation actually will help them, that will make them able to refer to that they're part of a group of people that experience the same. And in this way, I hope people of the audience and in day-to-day life, when people ask someone, where are you from, that they will engage also in this kind of conversations and will explain them.
Which is also what Carmen said, right? Like the personal outreach and, well, being a change agent is for everybody.
Yeah, I love that name.
Yeah, it's nice, huh? Everybody can be one. Let's go to our next question. If you could please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Jackson Odong. I come from Uganda, and I work in northern Uganda, more of a post-conflict community. And listening to your experiences touched me a lot. And to me, I find you very courageous and inspirational. Yeah. And from my experience working with post-war communities, one of the challenges is actually getting people to speak about their experiences and break out. And I wanted to find out, you actually rightly concluded by saying we should pay attention to these stories, but also seek for more stories. Yes. And I wanted to find out from you, one, how did you manage to break out and speak on this kind of difficult experiences? And then secondly, what can we do and what do we need to know that would help us stimulate or enable people to speak about these experiences? Because to me, it's like healing itself to hear, and also it is powerful for us to hear these stories. So, and worse still, it's more difficult for us to get these stories from children. What is it that we need to know? Thank you.
Well, there is, you can use techniques such as play therapy to be able to work with them. And my background is actually in social work. And so there are ways in which children can tell you what happened to them, whether it's child abuse, whether it's neglect, whether it's, of course, in a clinical setting. Now, there are what are called support groups, which you can actually put together in the community. When disasters, for example, have happened in countries or after war, this is an important part of the psychosocial treatments. And many times, this element is disregarded, even by non-governmental organizations, not to say by governments. But talking and playing and doing the kind of thing that was offered to us earlier, I mean, those things actually bring about this healing that can bring about talk. Okay, I'm a yoga instructor as well, and I hope to be doing some yoga for youth tomorrow. And there's the possibility of doing yoga at the beginning and then a yoga circle that would allow for children to actually get in. But there are ways to work with children, is what I'm saying. And I'm so happy that you're really interested in this. Now, let me tell you, trauma is like a roller coaster ride sometimes. you're here, and sometimes you're there. And so this is the only reason why, after graduating with a degree in economics, I went into social work because of my own healing as well.
Now, I'm very curious to hear from you, Patrick. When did your healing start? Was that when you started talking about it publicly?
I'm not sure.
Well, the gentleman
what you're
here
referring to.
said, you know, he's dealing with traumatized children. Now, I can imagine what you experienced must have been also quite traumatizing. Was talking about it, like here, standing here, I can imagine there must be lots of people who would not even think about standing here on the stage, room of strangers, and sharing quite a painful personal experience. Was that part of your healing too?
Well, I can answer to that because I wasn't aware actually of what was going on until quite recently. And now I'm here and I founded this NGO, and this is my way of dealing with the situation. It's very simple. What I've been through is something that is to be avoided. It can be avoided, and it has to be avoided. And I took it upon me to provide assistance to everyone else who was experiencing the problems that I was experiencing, because I had nowhere to go. But now there's this organization, and people who were in my situation, who are in the situation I was in, they can actually now go to the NGO, and hopefully I will be able to assist them.
Beautiful, thank you very much. I'm going to collect 2 questions at once, so let's listen to your question first, and then your question, and then it's for you to answer. Yes, please.
My name is Gunnar, and firstly, thank you for your absolutely inspiring stories. But my question is concerned whether you think children should have, should they be treated especially than adults? I mean, you both went to traumatic experience. Firstly, as you explained, and secondly, part of your life were taken away that you had no clue about. So shouldn't adults be also treated equally to children, as in the best for them in mankind?
Good question. Thank you. Next question.
My name is Mila. I'm from Ukraine, and conflict is going on in my country now. So I can only imagine how many children will be without parents, even now, even in 1 month. So my question is mainly about adoption and illegal adoption and the value of identity. So what do you consider to be better for that children? Lose their identity but get a chance for better well-being abroad, because in Ukraine it will be very difficult for them in such economic situation to find another family, or to stay in Ukraine but keep their national identity, but their chance for future will be lower and their well-being will be not so good as abroad.
Thank you very much. Let's start with if I may, with the last question for Patrick, and then the first question I'll end with Carmen.
Okay.
Patrick, adoption. This was a kind of a tough dilemma, but what would you answer?
It actually is a very good question. There's also a very clear answer to that. The United Nations Convention on the Right of the Child actually has a very important article about intercountry adoption that covers basically all of your questions. Because adoption is something that has to be done in a legal way. And for that there is the so-called subsidiarity principle that explains that there are several measures to be taken actually by state parties to ensure the rights of a child, also in case of adoption. If the child cannot remain with the mother and or the father, there are several possibilities for the child to stay within reach of the family or within the same country. And the UNCRC actually puts forward very clearly that intercountry adoption should be a last resort. And my personal experiences are completely in line with the Human Rights Conventions of the Rights of the Child.
So you would say, summarizing, if there are any ways that the child could stay in the region, choose for those options. Thank you very much, Patrick. Now the first question, which was also a tough question, should we actually treat adults as we treat young people within a legal framework? Carmen.
Yeah, definitely. But let me first emphasize that children are especially vulnerable, and there must be laws in place to protect them. And so conventions are important, but regulations that are in place in the countries are also important. In the case of the research that I conducted on child abduction in Guatemala, it's been now that a law is in place to alert, all of the media and so forth about this adoption and about the child abduction. And a lot of children actually have been found and prevented from being exploited in different ways. And so those kinds of legislations need to be taken place. But adults, of course, either because we're caretakers of the child, and many times, what happened with the subsidiarity principle that we're talking about is that families don't necessarily have the resources to keep them, and many times think about an option for adopting the child because they don't have the support. So supporting families is very important as well.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid time is running out. I could stand here, talk to you both a lot longer, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear a lot more, but we have to say goodbye for now. I hope both of you will be around a little bit after, so we can ask. Thank you for asking your questions, and let's give them another warm applause. Patrick van Noordhoven, Carmen Monico. Gracias. Thank you very much. Yeah, usually when I raise my hands, I'm a pacifist, so if I raise my hand, it's usually to do this. Sometimes when I'm making a strong point, I do this. But now I've been instructed to do something else, which is this. No, this? Is this that? Yes, this is what I'm supposed to do. Because I'm introducing a band, and they're called the Hague Idiots. They're actually kids from the block. They're from the Hagues, and one of the reasons why they're here, of course, because they're super cool and they rock, but another reason why they're here is that they just won the UNICEF High School Battle of the Bands. Give them a warm welcome when I introduce Anthony, Jens, Casper, and Dylan. The Hague Idiots.
Dylan, Casper, and Jens. And I'm Anthony. I like skateboarding, playing guitar, and that's pretty much it. So it's simple. Yeah, we're mainly here to play a song for you, and after that, outside we're gonna play a couple more songs. But yeah, we're gonna start with a story about our opinion about war. And how stupid it is, and so. Yeah, I played for 5,000 people, but it is the most terrifying performance I have ever been to. So it's kind of new for me. Thank you. Yeah, war is kind of the most stupid and useless things in the world. But what even more stupid is the people who still think they can win a war. But they can't win a war. In fact, they are only losers. And they just can't see it because they're blinded by the anger. My dad used to tell me, if you make a decision, you have to whenever you made a decision. Yeah, I said it's kind of new for me this. So yeah.
Well, hello. My name is Dylan van Dam. I'm 16 years old and I'm from The Hague. It's kind of in our band name, The Hague Idiots. And yeah, we were invited here because we won the UNICEF Talent Battle, and we didn't only win the honor of winning, because that was very cool to win, and we also won €2,500, and money we could spend on music instruments or gear, but we had a lot of money, and we were like, what to do with the money? So we decided to donate it, and yeah. And so we donated it to asylum seekers, refugees from conflict zones, and yeah. And so we went to one center for refugees in Katwijk, and all the children there were very happy to see us, of course, because we bought a lot of instruments and music gear for a lot of centers in the Netherlands, because we think that music is the best way to get your troubles off your mind, especially when you're in a situation like those refugees. So we went there and we played a couple of songs for them, and after that they played some songs for us, and it was really beautiful, because there was a boy, and he was just my age, and I'm 16, and he played a song on the guitar, and he sang with it, and he sang in a different language, so I didn't really get what he was saying, but it really didn't matter, because we could feel what he meant, and it was an emotional song about his home and why he had to leave, and it was a really touching song. And after that, I talked to him, and he told me that he lived in difficult conditions here with his mother, his little brother, and his 2 little sisters. And he said that he was just my age, and he was already head of his family. And I was like, whoa, that's impossible. I could never deal with such responsibilities right now. So I had a lot of respect for him. And that's our story and why we're here. And he remembers what he wanted to say. So.
Yeah, what I said. My dad used to tell me, whenever you made a decision, you have to make sure that you won't hurt anybody with it. And if you do, you have to look for other options. And in the case of war, I see tons of other options, like discuss the problem. And it doesn't have to be this way. And I'm only 14, but I already know fighting isn't the option. And they're grown-ups and stuff, and they they can't face it. It's just useless, And after Katwijk, the refugee center, I look different at my life, and all the things we call normal weren't that normal. So, like democracy or even freedom at all. Some countries don't have it, and we do. So I'm very proud and thankful for it. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to play one of our songs. It's called Rockin' Town. It's about The Hague, our city, and about things we like to do, our hobbies, and about nice places in The Hague. So. Let's go, I'll meet you there. Same place tonight. Downtown Big Market Square, where everything is always alright. The capital is fine, but it's not my home. Oh yeah, this is where I belong. If you come to 070, where every year's born a rock star hero, I won't let you down. If you come around, oh yeah, to my rockin' town. Let's take our boats to the beach today. The weather's fine and the waves so high. I'm with my body so I'm okay. We'll stay till the moon hits the sky. The capital is fine, but it's not my home. Oh yeah, this is where I belong. If you come to 070, where every year's born a rock star hero, I won't let you down. If you come around, oh yeah, to my rockin' town. We've got Kane and Direct. We've got the death as a matter of fact. Soul Sister Dance Revolution. Splendid time is no illusion. We've got ATO, alright. ATO's doing alright. So let's go to the Horse Cafe. Turn the music on, 'cause we're ready to play now. If you come to 070, where every year's born a rock star hero, I won't let you down. If you come around, oh yeah, to my rockin' town. 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 Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
The Hague Idiots. Yeah. And you are so right. Your city rocks. You know why? Because you're in it. I really love you. Thank you very much. Well done, guys. Just one very quick question. If we want to hear more of your songs, you write them yourselves, right?
Yes.
Yes. So if we want to hear more, where can we go? Do you have your own YouTube channel, or should we go to your you do?
Yes, we have our own YouTube channel, Facebook channel, website, Twitter, everything.
Instagram.
The whole shebang. So it's just Hague Idiots. That's what we should Google for.
And today in the afternoon, later we play right behind this wall outside.
Right behind this wall.
Yes. And tomorrow at the One Fest
in the center. It's called Grote Markt.
Yeah.
At the One Festival. It's outside in the sun, nice weather. So if you're here a couple of more days, you should totally check it out.
Well, I think your music is your best promotion. So thank you again. Another warm applause. The Hague Idiots. Thank you. Wow, what a day. It's not often that I host an event that both makes me laugh out loud and actually dry away some tears, and I did both today. We're about to end this part of the event. I would like to actually thank a few people. First of all, I would like to thank you. For being here, for sharing your energy, for sharing the inspiration, for making this a safe space to actually also tell personal stories or to share scary things or to ask questions. Thank you for that. So applause for yourselves, first of all. Of course, I would like to thank all the speakers who came from all over the world to share their stories today. Thank you, speakers. Thanks, of course, also to our hosts here at the iconic Peace Palace. Thank you for having us. It was a blessing to be here. Thanks also to everybody involved in the organization, the people behind and in front of the screen. Thank you for making this possible. And of course, thanks to all the people who shared their questions online. Thanks to the social media team for sharing those questions with us. And thanks to the people joining us on live stream. I know that my mom was one of them, so hi Mom, see you Sunday. For now, I would like to say that all of this will be on YouTube soon, so keep checking in. You will also be able to see the talks separately on YouTube. Keep the website in sight, and you will find them all. Most importantly, I would like to encourage you to keep talking, keep this debate alive. I would like to share with my motto. I already told you I'm a change agent, and my motto is, without change, no butterflies. And I believe that we are all butterflies, so let's keep flapping those wings. Peace, everybody. Hope to see you again. Peace.